Good morning and greetings from Canada's Atlantic coast. I'm speaking to you about half a kilometer away from the Port of Halifax, where it is 4 a.m. in the morning. The port is open for business, and so am I. My name is Peter Stewart. I am chief editor of portandterminal.com. Portandterminal.com is North America's fastest growing news website for people in the maritime space, ports and terminals, supply chain logistics. And I would like to thank the team at Container Exchange for the opportunity to participate in the Digital Container Summit this morning, and really congratulate them on their excellent work. I know these are very difficult times for everyone, and I think they've done a fantastic job pulling this conference together. I will be moderator for this presentation. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you this morning Thomas Bagge. Thomas is CEO and statutory director of the Digital Container Shipping Association, which very conveniently is called DCSA for short. Thomas will discuss some of the challenges with logistics in the container shipping industry due to the lack of standardized approach to digitalization. It's particularly relevant in the days of COVID-19. His presentation is titled Transforming Container Shipping Through Digital Standards. And just one point of housekeeping before we get started. Please do not hesitate to share any questions in the chat bar with me. We'll be collecting the questions, and Thomas will be answering them after he's had an opportunity to deliver his presentation. So without further ado, thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to Thomas.
Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you to the whole team behind the Digital Container Summit. As Peter said, it's not been an easy year. It is not an easy year, but I think having it online is clearly the second best option that we have. And so kudos for rethinking how we could keep up the momentum and have this important conference. I'm going to be talking about the transformation of the container shipping industry and the use of digital or data standards, and how that's impacting the general industry, the shippers, and all the participants that we see in international trade and supply chain. But before I do so, I just want to add some comments to the situation that we are all facing with COVID, because I think there are many things that we can certainly learn as we go through this process. Let's see if I can make the slides change as well. So we've all been forced to rethink our priorities and how we do things. That's both privately and certainly also professionally. But I think privately, first and foremost, our priority was around protecting our families. And once we found out that actually food shortages is not relevant, they are unfounded, we could start figuring out how is it that we go on and sustain our lives. And we realized that we certainly couldn't continue as before. We had more time. You can see me here with my youngest daughter. It had to be spent with the family in this lockdown. And out of personal experience, I felt that the tolerance for people's personal situations certainly increased. Many were impacted quite severely, unfortunately. But I sit back with an understanding that I know my team a lot better than I did before. As I said, there's more tolerance, there's more understanding, and perhaps more empathy. And those are things that are absolutely critical in any kind of transformation. So professionally, COVID-19 has also, as already mentioned here, it's prevented us from meeting in person. And recalling last year's Digital Container Summit, I'm going to miss the mixer we had, and I'm going to miss the receptions and the informal discussions and exchanges we had. And when I say these things, it's because transformation is absolutely, it's all about people, and these person-to-person relationships and encounters that we have are absolutely essential. Had we started DCSA in 2020, I doubt we could have done it, because when we initially started up the company, we had to bring the CIOs of the different ocean carriers together and create trust and create an understanding for situations that are very different company to company. And there the personal relationships That's what matters. And that's also what matters when we talk about transformation or digital transformation. And sometimes we put too much focus on digital. And we talk about blockchain and we talk about IoT and we talk about big data. But it's really the people and that we need to get to. These are the ones that are where that needs to change. That's how we change the processes if we want to change how the industry works. So even at a time like this, there are companies that succumb, of course, but there are certainly also companies that thrive. And I'm not sure how clear this is for you on the screen, but the chart on your left is that's the Zoom price, share price year to date. So Zoom, the video conferencing app, has increased more than this. Pictures from Monday. It's increased 400% at that time, and then it took another 40% increase on Wednesday. So I think it's around 500% increase this year. And that Zoom is not alone. Apple's share price is up 70%, Microsoft's up 40%, and it can of course be debated how reasonable it is that Zoom is now worth more than IBM or UPS or even Citigroup. But that's kind of not the point. The point here is really that digital businesses, they thrive even in crises like the one that we're currently seeing. And on the right-hand side, you see the year-on-year growth in online sales with data from Adobe. And those numbers are also current. They're from August as well. And they show an equally impressive development that's driven by the need to do shopping online during the pandemic. And of course, we can't, there's no direct comparison with container shipping because container shipping is not digital. It's about it's a transportation of physical goods. And therefore, when factories in China, they shut down or elsewhere, there's an immediate impact. And that is something that the container carriers live with day in and day out. But the goods that, that even if that did flow were also impacted. And it was not only about China, because bills of lading were unable to reach their final destinations. And therefore, consignees, they were unable to pick up the containers at the port that caused congestion. And it's not only the bill of lading process either, it's also the letter of credit process. And I spoke to the head of trade finance within HSBC not too long ago, and they actually said that the only people during the pandemic that are allowed in their offices, or at least in the first phases of the pandemic, were the people that had to process letters of credit because it was physical. They simply could not do it from home. Yeah. And when we then look at those things, there is an immense opportunity in front of us. There's an immense momentum. Everybody sees the pain right now, and that's an opportunity we can't squander. So if there's still any doubt, fence sitters out there that go like, yeah, but then I can say that the industry, the more digital players in an industry, according to a recent survey done by Bain & Company, they're 8 times more profitable than their peers that are not digital in the same industry. So for major shippers and forwarders, in fact, in most participants in international transport, COVID has presented a series of major concerns. And the current situation is putting a massive strain on supply chains, which already for the past 2 or 3 decades we've been pushing the limits of those supply chains, both in terms of distance, which is frequently debated now for many reasons, both trade wars and the ability of trust, but also in terms of efficiency. JOC recently said that the speed of container vessels has slowed down by 25% in the past decade, and everybody is trying to get more efficient, and that we of course see that as individual consumers and as private people as well. But in the short term here in COVID, the container carriers, they've been forced to manage their capacity in a market that has been extremely volatile. They've blanked sailings, they've increased omissions, they've implemented further speed reductions and removed vessels from service. And of course, at least if you judge by the Q2 reports, They've been quite successful in doing so, but it's of course short term. In the long term, these are all problems that we need to solve. Things can still be done more effectively or efficiently, but I think, frankly, more importantly, effectively from a customer standpoint, because the customers are hugely impacted by both the current situation and the opaque processes, antiquated processes that we have in the international supply chains that I'll also come back to. So we don't need to have delays due to bill of ladings that didn't arrive. We don't need to have delays due to letters of credit that are not being processed, or the lack of transparency as to whether your cargo is being loaded on the vessels it's been booked on. We don't need that. There are technologies out there that can reduce and eliminate such pains. But before we can actually deploy those technologies, we need to start using both the same language, but also the same vocabulary. And that's, of course, where digital standards, they play a role. And once we've done that, we will open a treasure trove of opportunities for deploying these new technologies. We'll see new business models emerging, and the existing players will start competing on what we see in other industries. That's price, of course, that they already do. It's service, it's customer service, it's picking up the phone, and it's the customer experience of having an easy journey when you need to load your cargo or ship your cargo. And it's product, of course. So when we look at other companies, there's quite a few that are that has excellent customer service, and one has to wonder what's the relationship worth that the current that we have in international supply chains today. The carriers, they have a lot of very powerful relationships at the moment with their shippers. But what if some of these new companies that has a much better customer experience, they were to move into our industry and try and disrupt it? They don't need the assets. If you look at efficiency, for instance, Amazon, they have pretty much one API with which they serve all their customers, whereas the container shippings, they have thousands and thousands and thousands EDI connections. So those are all individually, or many of them at least, are individually bespoke, whereas Amazon has gone out with one. And then you have, of course, scale. The ability to scale. I can't remember when Airbnb was founded, but it's probably not more than a decade old. And their ability to grow and scale a business using standards has been quite amazing. And as corporates, they now sort of rethink their travel budgets, remote working, we can actually work from home. There will be attempts to drive down cost, but it shouldn't end there. We need to rethink our processes, just like we did when we sat at home with our kids on our lap and did business anyway. It is possible, and we should not be satisfied with this as just less time at the office or not needing to commute. There are many things that we should and must question to become more digital and more digitally advanced industry. So the imperative is it's greater than ever, and I believe and we believe that we're currently at an inflection point right now. So the standardized products that we see in maybe to the right in the picture we have here, they are very often have a complex history behind them. That's what we're trying to depict on the left side of this slide, because international trade is complex, and it's too complex. There are many parties involved. We know them: shippers, consignees, forwarders, banks, customs authorities, inland service providers, regulatory bodies, brokers, and the like. There's a long list of documents that's required to be a participant in international transport. Of course, I already mentioned the bill of lading. There's commercial invoices, letters of credit, again, packing lists and insurance documents and certificates of origin. Most of them are paper-based. And then there's the antiquated processes, which is, of course, not only a carrier-related issue, but they are partly. So the booking process where many of the carriers, they send up to, I've heard a number as high as 50 emails going back and forward on each booking. That's completely unnecessary. We've seen that happen. We've seen that eliminated in other industries such as banking, where essentially we as banking customers, whether it's private or it's merchant banking, we do actually most of the work ourselves. And of course, then there's legislation which is hampering maybe the automation of processes, or doing the processes smarter. And legislation has been slow to adopt, let's say, or to ratify the needed changes that we need to have a digital business, especially on the documentation side, where I believe it's only 5 countries that have ratified the Rotterdam rules, and 4 of which are African countries, which, without any offense, is not the major players in international trade. So there's a call out here. There's a call out to collaborate. Let's start speaking the same language and using the same vocabulary, so we know what we're talking about. And let's agree on the digital standards that's going to enable interoperability, the deployment of new technology, faster innovation, and a much more efficient and effective, importantly, for the customer's supply chain. So in DCSA, we are working on a series of activities, and here in closing, I want to mention some of those. So in case you are interested, you can reach out using our website where there's contact forms. First and foremost, we work on an industry blueprint, and the industry blueprint takes a starting point in how we do business. So how does the carriers do both the operational side of the business, the physical, but also the documentation side? And we try to come up with a syndicated version at a reasonably high level for how we will do this. And that will enable ISV, software providers, technology service providers to have a map to build after. And immediately after that, we have what's called the data and interface standards, which examines all these points and creates the necessary messaging and data standards that's required at those specific points in the transportation chain. We also work on cybersecurity with a primary focus on what takes place on board the vessels. And we work on IoT to enable the deployment of smart containers to a much larger degree than we have it today, which again will increase transparency from a customer standpoint, but also make it much more efficient and optimize empty positioning and be good for a greener environment. And we work on port call optimization, which is essentially a collaboration between ports and container carriers and all the service providers that are also in the supply chain, truckers, rail providers, and bunker companies, and so on, to limit waiting time. So again, there's good business in that. If we don't have to hurry up and wait at a port, we can actually slow down. That's good. That's good for the shipping company. There's money in that. It's good for the environment as well. And then there's, of course, the very all-important e-bill of lading initiative that we are also running. Maybe just in closing here, we are a neutral organization. We do not endorse any vendors. We work with all, but it is the technology choice is of course specific to your individual companies. And so we are neutral, and we are non-for-profit. So this is an investment. We are funded by the carriers, but this is an investment on their behalf in creating a more digital supply chain. We are based in Amsterdam and and have been there for about 18 months now, and we represent about 70% of the world's containerized trade with the members you see here on your right-hand side. So in closing, we have an amazing opportunity. Let's not squander that. And in case you have something that you want to share with us, we'd be very, very happy to collaborate with you. and you can find more at our webpage. So with that, I'll hand back to Peter for a few questions.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm just going to do an audio test. Can you hear me?
We can,
hello,
Peter.
Hello. Very good. Thank you. All right. Well, we have several questions here for you. Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that. I've got several questions here for you, and I'll start. And forgive me if I mispronounced anyone's name. Harish. Thomas, what is the situation with regard to the training of people to handle these digital advances? Is DCSA going to be involved in training as you roll out standardization?
At this moment, we don't. We of course engage. So the way we work is we syndicate solutions. So the way when we have workshops, for instance, where if it's an IoT workshop, what we do is we invite all the carriers to send their SMEs, and their SMEs are there, and they are part of creating a syndicated solution for the industry. And it's all so within the carriers, it's typically the SMEs that sit with the knowledge and will take care of the training. So I can't really see whether it's an external question or not. But offhand, no.
Okay, thank you. And Diedrich had a question. Is there enough incentive for industry participants to collaborate and standardize? Hello.
So to be quite honest, we found it difficult to make a business case, and that's something we constantly work on. We did manage to make a rough estimate on the bills of lading and switching to an electronic bill of lading, where we believe that the industry can save 4 billion over a range of years. But of course, there's a lot of assumptions behind that. In my personal opinion, I think there's a lot of incentives to do this right. I think there's both a necessity to get it right because of the many startups that are playing in this in the field, and so the container carriers, they have to come up with and continue to improve on their customer service, just like they've continued to improve and make the supply chain more efficient over the many decades. I typically use an example from when I lived in Spain 15 years ago. I bought a flat screen for 3,000 euros. It was my first flat screen, 3,000 euros. Yeah, and now you can buy, if you spend 3,000, you're going to get a pretty marvelous flat screen now. And you add 15 years since I lived there of inflation, which hasn't really existed, but certainly R&D cost and prices have come down tremendously, and that's partly because what has been enabled by the container shipping lines in terms of expanding their network so production can happen all over the world today. So I think they've done a lot on the operational side, but now it needs to shift to the customer experience side. And you can always debate whether there's enough incentive. I think there is, to be honest.
I think, Thomas, to your earlier point, COVID-19 has made it, I guess, to the industry patently obvious that it needs to move this way. I guess the point you're making is that nobody wants to own the beta when the world goes to VHS, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question here from Lisa Rose Darcy. Thomas, given the complexity of the supply chain and many players involved, is it on the DCSA roadmap to further open up outside of carriers only, or to engage with key industry stakeholders in a consultative capacity to collaborate on the development of standards? Will you be opening up beyond the shipping lines?
So at this point, we don't have any plans of opening up beyond shipping lines, but we do collaborate with a wide range of both regulators, technology service providers, and industry participants, and that's absolutely critical. There are many good companies out there that are seeking solutions, and it would be half-hearted if we just look at our internally with the carriers. So we do collaborate. Membership, it's simply because the way the association has been constructed, we haven't opened up for members yet, but we do collaborate, as I say. And if you are on our webpage, you can just click on what you're interested in, whether it's the electronic bill of lading, whether it's IoT, all the elements, and then we will get in touch with you.
Thank you. And I have a question here from Alexander Lapshin, which I think really is a nice segue, Thomas, for you to summarize your presentation with the time that we have remaining. And I'll read it to you. Thomas, thank you for the great keynote. What do you think are the biggest benefits of standardization and the initiatives of DCSA for logistics technology providers?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So first and foremost, standards, we have it all over, right? In our language, in our alphabet, and it creates interoperability, and with interoperability, comes a much better service. And for the technology service providers, I think that there's an excellent opportunity here to say, if you come out with one product and I've seen this myself, they come out with a great product, but it only works for one carrier because they all work differently. But if we can start to standardize the way people work on things where they don't compete, like taking a booking, a great example of something that the airline industry has done many years ago, that will of course allow the technology service providers to hit the mark or increase their batting average, as the Americans say, because their solutions will all of a sudden be applicable to 9 carriers, maybe instead of just one.
And then finally, what are your next steps? What do you see as your priorities for your organization over the next 6 months, let's say?
Over the next, short term, it's the things that that's in the presentation. We are coming out with a publication on the e-bill of lading standards later in the year. That's of course very important for us, but also on IoT we have things planned. I think longer term, we are going to have a discussion here in October with our members to see where they are in terms of, we are funded by the carriers, as I mentioned, and therefore a lot of our activities, how fast we go, what areas we get involved in, really depends on their appetite as well. But short term, next 6 months, look out for some e-bill of lading standards, look out for more noise around IoT as we progress there. That's the most important things.
All right, and then as we are all logistics people here, and time is important, we have about 1.5 minutes, so I just wanted to again thank you, Thomas, for a fascinating presentation. I know the team at Container Exchange will be distributing the presentation, and I know a recording of this presentation has been made as well. So thank you again to Container Exchange, and thank you, Thomas, for your presentation. I wish you all a very successful conference.